3 minutes after 12 is the time, and we turn our attention next to probably an example of Sheila Fogarty being a far more consummate broadcaster than me, because she tackled this character by name on air at a time when I didn't want to. And the reason why I didn't want to was probably linked to self-importance. What, you, James? Surely not. No, seriously. I think there may have been a little bit of self-importance in thinking that the oxygen of publicity that you give to a character like this is so great that you should cut off the supply. And although LBC has, over the years, gone from strength to strength to strength, I don't know that we're that big. I don't know that, a bloke who's got millions and millions of followers on various social media platforms is going to gain much from being talked about on this programme. I don't know about that. I'm thinking out loud, and I shall invite you to do the same shortly, because we're talking about a man who I am, perhaps childishly, going to refer to as Andrew Potate-toe. I'm going to call him Andrew Potate-toe for the course of this conversation, because he is as ridiculous as he is sinister. His real name, in case you're wondering, is Andrew Tate, and if you've never heard of him, well, frankly, lucky you. Because he's the worst sort of misogynist. I'm not a trained therapist, but if there is not some deep and abiding hatred of his mother involved in what this man purports to be, because I did see one report this weekend from, I think it's someone who works for him or has been his girlfriend, claiming that he's nothing like that in private and it's all an act. But I'm not qualified to comment on that. This idea that you haven't been hurt by your mother's neglect or your mother's unkindness or callousness. As a very small person, you put enormous amounts of effort into pretending that you haven't been hurt by the lack of mother love. And the consequence of that is a sort of hatred stroke subjugation of women. So I have not been hurt by the lack of mother love, and I will prove it by misogyny, by treating women as inferior, by treating women as chattels or property, and claiming all manner of horrible things that just cast women essentially as second-class citizens, because that way I rob the woman who hurt me of agency. I couldn't possibly have been hurt by my mother's disinterest in me, because women are irrelevant and inferior and unimportant. It's a fairly well-trodden therapeutic path, but as I say, I'm not massively qualified to unpick it. It's just the thing that screams at me whenever I read about his antics, up to and including the allegations that he now faces in Romania for all manner of hideous conduct. They remain allegations and accusations, but I think the police have succeeded in securing 30 days more in police detention while the investigation continues. And the reason I didn't talk about him is the same reason that we don't talk to. I can't even remember whether we talked about them much. Your EDL man and your Anjem Chowdhury, the kind of people who are so desperate for attention. There it is. I always get there in the end, even if it takes a little bit too long. But when people are really desperate for attention, I have this inner impulse not to give it to them. But I think that is obviously wrong sometimes, isn't it? Andrew Potate-toe was so desperate for attention that he posted an almost incomprehensible message to Greta Thunberg on social media. Again, I say misogyny, you say Greta Thunberg. Greta Thunberg and Meghan Markle, really. You find out what people think about them, and you'll find out where they sit, whether they realise it or not, on the misogyny scale, just as a general rule. So he posted something about owning lots of cars, and therefore please notice me. And he sent it to Greta Thunberg, who somewhat unexpectedly replied with a tweet that the last time I checked, and you might want to make a note of this, the last time I checked, it was the 4th most popular tweet in the history of Twitter. So those of us who sit here slapping ourselves on the back for getting 100,000 likes or 1 million views, Greta Thunberg has had us for breakfast before she's even got out of bed in the morning. The fourth most, but the last time I checked, so it may have gone third now. Barack Obama, I think, was in third. Elon Musk had, I think, the second most popular tweet in the history of Twitter. After buying it, I managed to miss this when he said, I'm going to buy Coca-Cola next and put the cocaine back in it, which is quite a good joke, actually, to be fair. Don't do drugs, kids. So she tweeted something that was a reference to the size of his appendage and also the patheticness of his intervention. And it was one of those odd moments where the rug was pulled so completely and comprehensively from beneath this man's feet that he should never have tried to get up. He should just have laid there until everybody else's attention had gone elsewhere. Because if you stand up and demand attention and then you get it and it is almost entirely negative, the best thing you can do is lie down and hope it goes away. This would be my advice. I don't think I'd be able to take this advice myself. I'd be there going, I'm fine. But actually, maybe not post-therapy, but pre-therapy, certainly. You can never admit vulnerability. You can never admit failure. You can never admit being wrong. As indeed my last book was about. So he got rinsed every which way by Greta Thunberg and then made a video in what appeared to be his mum's dressing gown. He made a bizarre video smoking a cigar and saying, I haven't been owned at all, when everybody knew he'd been owned, and made some jokes about pizza. And then he got arrested on sex trafficking charges, which continue to be investigated. And you know, it's grim, however you look at it. But, and here is the thing, he retains enormous popularity among sort of young teenage boys of any age. I know that sounds odd, but think about it. Young teenage boys of any age. Up to and including people his age, young teenage boys of any age. That's the key to this. Teenage boys are weird, deeply weird. But, God, another complaint. It's Thunberg, not Thunberg, sorry. Honestly, look, everyone's a critic. And my understanding is not as good as it should be or could be because I've had that view. And sometimes the line between my work life and my private life is non-existent, as you know. It's you know, my interests off air are pretty similar to my interests on air, but not always. So on this one, I don't know much about him. I have quite a lot of godsons, so I can tell you that one of my godsons fell under Andrew Tate's spell without giving anything away because I've got a few. So I had a little look into it, and it is, I mean, it's very entry level. It's very basic misogyny. And it's got a little bit of incel attached to it. You can see why it would appeal to people who can't get a girlfriend and want to blame it all on girls. A touch of the Jordan Petersons. Again, someone I don't know much about, but what I do know is not encouraging. You know, it's a sort of, it's a celebration of never, it's a celebration of never accepting that perhaps you might be the problem. Okay? It's a celebration of stubbornness. It's a celebration of what I just described to you. So if the world is treating you appallingly, there is something wrong with the world. If every girl you've ever met thinks that you're a joke, there is something wrong with women. If the society in which you are struggling is real, then it must be the fault of society. It's never, ever your responsibility to change. Unless, you know, you tidy your bedroom and suddenly all your treats, all your dreams will come true. And that's why I haven't looked into it too much until I was compelled to on behalf of a godson. And I was fascinated by what I discovered and dismayed, but not enormously, because I thought, well, I'll have a word with the lad and he'll soon see. I mean, we can talk it through, talk about it. Got strong women in his life. He's got wonderful, but they didn't know what was going on. And that's the really interesting thing. So the entry level is a sort of mental health grift. It's a sort of talk about, men don't get enough support. And you think, well, that's true. And men need to, you know, be looked after better. And you think, well, that's true. And then you get to, and it's all women's fault. It's a funny one but it works. It's like it's a gateway drug, if you like, and that's where perhaps he'd slipped under my radar. It's always about women. There's a Jordan Peterson quote, the idea that women were oppressed throughout history is an appalling theory. There's always misogyny underpinning all of these people, and misogyny is almost always born of childhood trauma. But, of course, loads of people had dreadful childhoods, and they don't grow up being weapons-grade misogynists. So I think the question is, what should I have done? Is that too self-referential? What should I have done? So there is one qualification for contributing to this conversation. I want to make this absolutely clear from the start, is that you know a lot more about this character than I do, all right? So you are either... I don't know that I'm in the mood to talk to you if you're still under his spell, but we'll see. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. What should I have done? When I found out through my personal life that this fella's reach was considerable, I think because he'd been banned from Twitter as well, I kind of relaxed a bit, and then Elon Musk brought him back. That famous centrist, Elon Musk, who also brought back Donald Trump, of course. I am going to ask you that. So, I mean, look, what should I have done is a question that, I mean, maybe if you've never listened to this program before, you're going to struggle to come up with an interesting contribution. So how should another criticism, it's not Thunberg, it's Thunberg. I'm just going to call her Greta in future. I think that'll save us all an awful lot of bother. How should responsible media, and I make that distinction clear because I know exactly how irresponsible media, desperate attention-seeking media, can't wait to get people like this on their shows. You know, it's why Farage would talk to Alex Jones, wouldn't he, back in the day, the Sandy Hook liar. So responsible media, or at least let's even cut another one. How about this then? Media that at least aspires to being responsible. Media that tries to be responsible. It won't always succeed, but at least aspires to being responsible. How should they handle Andrew Tate? Should we be talking? Should those of us that oppose misogyny be talking about the world's most successful misogynists, even though we fear? There's the question. It's 1:15, almost brought it in on time. Should those of us who oppose misogyny be talking about the world's biggest misogynists, despite the fact that by talking about them, we give them some of the attention they so obviously and desperately crave? Now, if it's the President of the United States of America, I don't see that you've got much choice to at least talk about it. I don't think you need to talk to it. And if you are going to talk to it, the first thing you should do is read out a long list of all the things that he's done and said that prove his misogyny beyond doubt, and then sit back and watch him try and squirm his way out of it. But, of course, you can't do that if, A, you're so bent by sycophancy that you don't want to upset him, and B, you want him back on your programme at some unspecified point in the future. So if it's the President of the United States of America who's a weapons-grade misogynist, you have to talk about him, and you have to talk about his misogyny because its influence is clear and it's considerable. But if it's just an internet dude, however big his following, what is the correct way to handle this? 0345 6060 973. And Alexander, you're right. There's a book by Laura Bates called Men Who Hate Women that is brilliant on this and covers a lot of the stuff that I don't have the depth of knowledge and understanding to cover. But here it is. What's the right approach for those of us who despise misogyny to the world's most successful misogynists? When that's their job is being a misogynist. It's not like a side product of their newspaper columns, if you're talking about Jeremy Clarkson, or their political career, if you're talking about Donald Trump. What is the correct approach to professional misogynists from those of us who despise misogyny?